it was a different approach you were doing. Yeah.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'd like to call us to order, and it's actually calling to order the reconvening of a council meeting from April 6th. Today, of course, is April 13th, and it's now just after 3 o'clock as posted. And the first item is to clarify our agenda going forward, which is the items that were not concluded on our regular council meeting last time. So we start with item 8.4, which is the financial plan, which is 8.4 on the previous agenda. And in our last agenda, we had also agreed to hear item 10.2 near the end of the meeting. And in an email this afternoon, the individual has also said that that would be okay today to move 10.2 to the end of our agenda. And I think we should actually do that after item 12 then, if that's still acceptable to Jerry and to council. So we'd recommend that after 10.2 be moved to after the council correspondence. 10.2. And I'm not aware of needing to re-adopt the agenda.
No, Your Worship. Probably the only item could be is just accepting any additions since the last meeting. I'm not sure if there was any new material, though. I think it's everything's the same.
There's a revised financial plan, so perhaps we should note that as well, that item 8.4 has a, and then I'll just ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as identified with a revision of new material in 8.4 and the 10.2 to be at the end of the meeting. Councillor Seegers moved, seconded. Councillor Lutz, all those in favor? Thank you very much. That's carried. Now, finally, to our District of Sechelt 2016-2020 Financial Plan Bylaw number 552. We have a staff report somewhere. Could I ask the Manager of Financial Services to introduce this to us again?
Certainly. The additional information that you have in front of you that I've just given you in the new bylaw, we've had two changes since the last time I wrote the report. The two changes have been, I included the $13,000 in the capital plan for the Chapman Creek restoration of the trail. And those you will see highlighted, the differences of $13,000 highlighted in yellow in this next page, I'm not sure.
Page 2 at the top.
Page 4, I guess. Okay. And as well, when you go through the process of calculating property taxes, there's several revisions that occur. We recently received the revised roll, and in the revised roll, our assessments have reduced. And those are the dollars that are highlighted on page probably 6 or 7. I don't have the pages. Oh, maybe I do.
It's page 4 at the top of that.
Yeah.
What you distributed today.
So those are the two changes I put into the plan.
And this is before us for second reading, which is the opportune time for full discussion. And
second and third.
One at a time. Sorry. Yeah. I'll get it through second before I get it through third. And that's just because councillors have been telling me they'd like to discuss second reading. So let's look for a motion for second reading. Councillor Seegers, thank you very much. And that's seconded by Councillor Mueller. And is there any discussion of our budget at second reading? Councillor Mueller's light was on first. I'll see his first.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to offer some comments on the budget. At last year's budget adoption, I offered some additional comments that maybe go outside of a question. But I wanted to thank staff under the direction and guidance of Linda Klassen for having an open discussion of our finances with council. I think that was perhaps one of the best outcomes of this budgeting process, is that we really got to look at, and I want to commend staff for bringing forward a number of small adjustments in order to keep ourselves in good financial health. Last year, when we adopted the budget, my comments to Victor Mema, and anybody can find this in archives, is that we were overspending our resources, not by a small amount, but by a rather large amount. And I voted to approve that budget only in the concept that it was a transitional budget to something, changes that would be much larger and widespread. He's no longer with us, and the finance team that was left in his departure have done what they can. I still think that we need to look for that widespread change in the future. I want to pull out a few things that I think really indicate the big picture, and I've mentioned this not only on my blog, but in a number of different situations where our finance has been discussed. So let's talk about some of the big ticket items. We now know, in the wake of the McElhaney report and as well the Urban Systems report, that there are somewhere in the tune of, and I'm going to speak in generalities here, $40 million in capital requirements over the next 5 years that we need to consider. And those are specifically related to water treatment and roads, but as well additional other items. Additionally, we have a operating budget that is currently $3.8 million over our annual revenue. So currently all capital spending is coming from reserves, grants, or borrowing. We have additionally a debt saturation, which means that without a referendum, Sechelt cannot borrow any more money to debt service above $500K a year, which is not very much, not enough at least to consider what's in front of us. So what these represent are large-scale threats to our financial position that will take years to fix. And it's going to require very strict council oversight, as well as public and private support and the full support of our staff to realign the district in the types and orders of magnitude that are required. And I want to note additionally that since that time frame, council has hired a new CAO, someone who has really quite extensive experience at financial realignment, and we're going to be looking to him as well as the public to support the District of Sechelt to get back to what I will call some type of reality, which may involve large-scale changes in fees and just a general financial realignment. So I'm prepared to support this budget. I know that there are things that in it that will change over the year. There are certainly some oversights we now know that we have to correct, but I am looking in the final 2 years that we really start to get on track and make some of the big decisions that we have to make. Thank you.
Thank you for those sobering comments, Councillor Mueller. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. For me, this budget is basically what I call a status quo budget. It means we're really doing very little different. Let me give you a couple examples. We've got a public works building, and we've got about $2 million sitting there for a public works building. It's been sitting there for about 3 years, and we haven't done anything with it. We've got a 5-year plan that still shows that we're going to spend $1.3 million on vehicles and equipment. I've seen no reduction in the operational budget, not to mention infrastructure or underfunded liability. In the current financial situation that this district finds itself, we need to work a whole lot smarter and a whole lot more efficient. Our expenses are continuing to increase, and our revenue is not keeping pace. If this council wants to address items like infrastructure renewal, the McLeany report, gathering places, library expansion, band shells, and other items, we need to take a firm position on our expenditures. This budget, to me, is a disappointment at best. And our only hope is that our new administration and management team will take us in the right direction so that this community can move forward in a positive direction.
Thank you for those remarks. Any other remarks by councillors? I'd like to say a few words, if I may. Not to quite the same degree, but to some degree I share concerns that have just been expressed. And my continual concern is when we look at our total budget revenues, which in 2016 are estimated to be $14,311,000, and we look at the very next line that our operations are going to be $16,325,000. So that is the continual infrastructure deficit we talk about. And somehow we have to make sure that our operations, at the very least, match our total revenues. It would be good if our service and programs actually met our property taxes, but that would be a gap too far to go. I had asked a few weeks ago for a bit of a delay in the process so I could take a look at this budget more carefully due to being away for a period of time. And I want to say there was two things that I was focusing on. One of them was the mill rate. We had all agreed that we would try and keep the taxation mill rate the same so that even though there was a growth in the community or growth in the assessed value, we wouldn't raise the taxation on any given $1,000. And I think we've managed to do that. It took a while to figure out how that worked. And it's not exactly a one-to-one, but if we look at the, on page 4, Schedule B, the financial plan statement, when you look at the values for 2016, you'll notice that our property value by residential has gone up very, very, very slightly, 0.31%, actually 0.29, but our business property valuations has dropped, as has the managed forest. I don't know why that's highlighted. Because of that, the mill rate can't be exactly the same. So we agreed we were going to capture the increased value in property in Sechelt, share in that increased value, and it's gone up about 7%. So our budget revenue will go up about 7%. I accept that and understand it. What I feel compelled to draw to your attention, though, is that there was an agreement, and it was actually recommended, a resolution that was amended from the original submitted by the Finance Department, was that the additions in taxation would be a contribution to general reserves as opposed to capital reserves. And that concerns me. And it concerns me because taxation is not voluntary. People don't come into the second floor and say, well, here's a bit for some sidewalks and I'll take a bit of a street light, but I don't want to pay for this or that. They actually are compelled to pay taxes, and because it's compelled by the force of the state, including police, military, and seizure of property, we have to be very, very careful of why we take tax revenue from people. And when you raise taxes and put it over to general reserves, it tells me that you're raising taxes, but you don't even know what you're going to do with it. Something will come up and you'll draw down. But it actually isn't budgeted as an item for expenditure. It isn't budgeted for capital. It isn't budgeted for the infrastructure issues that have been raised. They're just put into general reserves so we can draw on them as things come up over the year. And my position is if you don't know in April where you want to spend the money, you shouldn't be spending that money. Simple as that. So if I'd been here, I would have argued that we support the original recommendation that any additions in taxation that are coming in as additional revenue, in fact, be put into the capital reserves so that they are in fact more controlled and not simply open to new projects coming through the year. What happens is, we've already seen it, here we have an adjustment in this budget between first and second reading for the Chapman Creek Trail, $13,000. Oh, well, that's not very much. and then we'll see an adjustment for another project, perhaps library expansion or design for library that we hadn't really planned on, and we'll find a little bit of money of that. It's in general reserves. The only way to control your impulses as a council that spends based on community demand is to put that money away into specific reserves where it actually is allocated, or tell us today where you want that general reserve to be spent. So I'm quite concerned about that. And I'll recognize Councillor Seegers for her comments, and then I may come back to see if we need to make that amendment or not. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I'll speak to that because that was my recommendation. And the reason I requested that it go into general reserves, general unrestricted reserves, rather than capital, is we are dealing with the Sea-Watch subdivision, and we will have some potential costs up there that we don't know what they are. We don't know if they're operating. We don't know if they're capital. And if the funds go into the capital reserves at this point, we cannot take them out and use them in operating. So that was my recommendation. I would hope that those funds stay there, and that at the end of the year, if we don't need them for that purpose, we can then allocate them to capital.
My approach to building reserves is that if there are operating savings during the year, and we always hope there will be, that surplus at the end of any year goes into general reserves. And that's how you build your general reserves. But you don't start in advance by collecting more money than you need to put into general reserves. You start with your operating budget, all of your planned programs, all your planned services, and if you can find savings during the year for whatever reasons, that surplus at the end of each year appropriately goes into a general reserve, so you can determine what to do with it. I find it not rigorous enough. I think it leaves us open to catering to our own possibilities that we'll see the money that's there and we'll want to spend it. The specific example you used, and that's certainly, I guess I'd put that more in the sense of a contingency. We don't know what may or may not happen at Sea-Watch. It may sometime during the year create more funding pressures, and it may not. I think there's always possibilities of things changing. And we don't want to budget on the basis that we're giving ourselves I didn't use the word, but I just heard slush fund. But I've just learned over experience that we have to be as rigorous as we can with our own budgeting if we expect to actually have staff and everyone else follow through on it, and if we want to meet community expectations. So I certainly agree that the example raised is a potential unexpected cost. I probably would have been happier if we'd identified a place to put money that was put aside for that purpose. If at the end of the year it wasn't spent, it would go into general reserves. But in the meantime, it would be allocated to potential costs at Sea-Watch. I can understand why we may not do that, but that actually would have been, be specific. Otherwise, it looks to the community as if we're collecting taxes, but we're not sure what it's going to be used for. And so it's just a little extra in our back pocket in case something comes up in the year. And it's far better to be able to say, no, I'm sorry, we don't have any extra. Because there will be requests. We get community interests, we get grant requests, we get unexpected contingency things that will come. And we need to build ways of saying, no, the budget's set. And we live with it. We live within our means. So I'm not sure what the pleasure of council would be on that, but I see Councillor Inkster is ready to speak.
Having been here when we had a larger leaky roof fund, I guess we'll call it, it's unfortunate to look at what's there now. However, we've had two budgets to look at. In one sense, we could say that one of the budgets had our hands tied. A little difficult to say that too strongly because it reminds one of John Turner. But we have two budgets left. So what I hope we do, and I would ask Ms. Klassen if she knows now when we start talking about next year's budget, when will that happen? Because we've heard from a number of council members that we need to make some adjustments. And we had an opportunity this year and we did not. So what I'm wondering is when we will have that first meeting for next year so that we can have those proposals and those ideas brought forward for adjustments so that we can, because I'm prepared to support some good ideas to deal with our infrastructure deficit as we move forward. But I'd like to have those ideas brought forward and put on the table because we're talking about it. And I've talked about it for 10 years looking at our budget, but what you have to do is, and my challenge is bring forward some ideas to deal with those challenges and put some proposals forward. And I'm really looking forward to that because I'm certainly prepared to support them.
And the response will come from our Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm pleased to hear the question as to when do we start on next year's budget. And from a staff perspective, that has started. I think probably more importantly is that we have a new Director of Finance who starts on Monday. And I met with Mr. Stewart on last Friday, and we had already had some preliminary discussions about moving ahead with the budget cycle for the 2017 five-year financial plan. And so I'm definitely looking very forward to having Mr. Stewart come and work with the finance team and all of staff so that we have are able to listen to what council is directing at the policy level regarding the financial plans, and to have a much more thorough discussion on expected expenditures in 2017 well in advance of 2017. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Seeing no other lights on, I'll leave my remarks at the level of values and not look for a specific amendment, with the note that I will be treating the general reserve as a closed reserve. And we'll have to really work to get any money out of it. Any further discussion on second reading? Councillor Mueller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to temper my previous comments by saying that all too often and in town councils, we shoot the messenger. And I hope in this situation that's not what we're doing. The ultimate responsibility for the financial position of the district relies with council. And I hope that in this upcoming year, we can provide really clear indication to staff about the financial realignment, what we want it to look like, and have it projected out 5 years. I know it's a lot of work to do in 1 year, but I look to the mayor to see what would be the best avenue to bring that before council for a vote.
And thank you very much for that. And those comments actually speak to what I was thinking when Councillor Inkster was saying he looks forward to dealing with the issue, but bring us some ideas. The ideas actually have to come from this table. And it's not a matter of staff finding a way to solve major expenditures, as Councillor Inkster is agreeing. There's going to be some significant fiscal realignment in the next 2 years. And our work will be to prepare the community for that. At second reading, any further discussion? All those in favor of second reading? And that's carried. Do I have a motion? And would you like all those opposed? One opposed? Do you want that noted? Okay. And do I have a motion for third reading? Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz, and having had our discussion and no amendments at second reading, all those in favor of third? That's carried. Any opposed? One opposed. Thank you to everyone for taking us through this, and it'll come back for adoption at our next regular council meeting. Item 10.1 is remedial action requirement regarding property owned by William Proust. And we have a report from the bylaw officers who are with us. And first, a motion to receive the report, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz. And we'll look to Mr. Horning to give us a brief synopsis of the report. Thank you.
So I guess I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. The property in question was first dealt with back in 2008 and continues to be dealt with to this point in this date. The debris and accumulation of debris on the property as a result of the property owners to begin with, and then a fire that was on the property. And most recently, the property has become a place of where individuals from throughout Sechelt have begun using as a dump. And the property owners, we've lost contact with Mr. Prost, William Prost, at the beginning of 2016 and haven't had any contact with him since. I've had contact with his son. His son indicated that he'd be talking to his father in relation to the property, and to this date, there still hasn't been any further action or anything taken on it. The property has become a safety and health hazard to all members within the district of Sechelt. And as a result, a dump as well for the remainder of it, and it's unsightly in its condition, and at this given point in time don't have any other means of dealing with Mr. Prost other than coming to a conclusion or presenting a remedial action to move forward in cleaning up the property. The ticketing and so forth has and was done with Mr. Prost, and each one of the tickets remains still outstanding, and no action or communication on those tickets has also been received from him. And thus it's been brought before you at this point.
Thank you very much. I think the report was fairly clear and detailed. Are there any clarifications of the report or from Mr. Horning while he's here? Mr. Wright, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. I certainly don't have any difficulty with the action being taken. I guess that this issue started in 2008, and it's now 2016. And I can't believe that it took this long to deal with this kind of an issue. I don't know whether you want to provide any comment on that or not, but it seems like a long time to get to this stage. And I guess for an issue something like this, I don't know what the correct timeline is, but this certainly doesn't. This seems to be an extended timeline, and I just can't believe it took that long to get to this point to make a decision on this. It's been an issue for years, and it appears that we've done very little or nothing about it, and that gives me great concern with an issue this small, how we approach a number of other issues that might be significantly larger.
Any comment on the times?
Oh, I can certainly explain. Well, I can explain it from my perspective of things. I became involved in this issue in January 2016. And this is the direction and actions been taken as a result of that. The other parties involved in this no longer have employment with the District of Sechelt.
And Councillor White, you know that our role in life is to clean up outstanding issues and things from the past. That's why we're here. Councillor Wright.
Yes, and thank you, Worship, and I appreciate your comment because that helps. I guess like when I first joined council, somebody told me that council's a living body, okay, and it doesn't matter whether you're on the previous council or not. You get to inherit all those good things and all those bad things. And when it comes to administration, I would expect you get to inherit the good things and the bad things as well. So thank you very much for looking after it.
This is one that I inherited.
Thank you.
If I could have somebody move the resolutions in item 2. Councillor Seegers moves, seconded by Councillor Mueller, and I recognize Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. There are some timelines laid out in these recommendations. We're talking 21 days after notice, and then 7 days after that, where are we in this? It's today when the 21 day starts then? Or when this comes, like,
Yeah, once you make a decision in relation to it, the remedial action process begins. So then you'll have time from this point, and then it comes before council before taking action then. So this is giving them notification that we will be moving forward with action. The action will take after the period of time then.
perfect, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Lutz?
So if we get to the stage of the district cleaning this up and hauling it away, how do we keep it from becoming a dumping zone yet again?
No, it's okay. Thanks for the suggestion, Mr. Horning.
For the driveway. No. It's going to have to something that I'd have to consider and talk with Public Works about, and stopping the access to the property, which individuals would have to have access to their property. But if it's something that they're not going to have and accept and we close it off, then it'll be something that if they requested, we could open up again. So it would be something we'd have to take under consideration and look at all the legal aspects of actually shutting off access to the property completely.
Okay. Well, that question actually raises the most important part of this dynamic and why it's taken so long to deal with it. This is not, in and of itself, Mr. Proust's problem. These are community members. These are community members who are dumping and using that as a dump site. So how do you actually have people with that level of understanding become more sensitive to what they're doing? That's the real challenge. This is not Mr. Proust who's in Vancouver. He's not dumping on the site. These are your neighbors. Any further discussion of the resolutions in front of us? All those in favor? Any opposed? Day one of remedial action is tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. Moving on, we've rescheduled 10.2 to the end of the meeting. So now we're at 10.3, RCMP occupancy agreement, which is item 10. First, a motion that it be received. Councillor Seegers and Shanks, all those in favor. And if I can look to Ms. Clausen to speak to the report.
In the last few years, we've been negotiating with the RCMP to reach an agreement. Sorry, is that better? We've been negotiating with the RCMP to reach an agreement for occupancy. It's been a very long time since we've had an agreement. We finally reached an agreement that you see attached with all the formulas there for you to have a look at. Currently, they owe us about $550,000. And they also made an offer to pay us out the self-funded portion of that, the RCMP building. So in my recommendations, I'm recommending the occupancy agreement as well as getting paid out those self-funded portion of costs.
And when those funds are received for the self-funded portion, does it go into general revenue or capital reserves or?
We have not, council may direct us if they like.
But it basically comes into general.
Yes.
Good. We can fight over which road to do. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I have a question on page 29, 3.2A. This talks about the period of occupancy with the building. And it says that this agreement basically expires 2017, December 31st, 2017. And the RCMP may renew the occupancy period for one additional renewal period of 5 years. Mm-hmm. And then 3A says, on the final renewal period, there shall be no right of further renewal. So what actually happens then? Like, we have a building, but they can't renew it.
I think we would go into negotiations.
Yeah. They can renew it.
They can renew it, but we would have to negotiate.
We're back to square one with negotiations.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
We finally own the building outright at that point, which is why we're not going to allow them to just negotiate.
Yes.
And former mayor and Councillor Cameron Reid is the one who actually was the force behind putting this arrangement together, which was pretty innovative, and it had federal government funds, provincial funds, and municipal funds. But at the end of the day, we have a courthouse and amalgamated detachment, and at the end of the day, a facility that we own for negotiations. So it was a good move. We have item 2, somebody to move that council approve. Councillor Seegers has moved 2 and 3. Any further discussion? Seconded by Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you and well done. That's taken another one that's taken a while, but it's wrapped up. We jumped from 10.3 to 10.6 of our former agenda because we did deal with the drag racing and the appointment of the corporate officer. 10.6 is an item on marijuana and related products regulation. Seconded by Councillor Wright. And any discussion? Somebody to move the resolution. Councillor Wright, Councillor Lutz. Any discussion of that? Council? We did vote on. All those in favor of receipt? None were opposed to receipt. And we also have on the floor, we had 2 motions on the floor at the same time there. So now we would be voting on the resolution to release the item from closed meeting. And the item was simply that the council is directing staff to investigate zoning and business license options for sales, production, dispensary, and/or supply of marijuana or related products or services, and report to council after the senior management team is in place. And as you've heard, they're starting to come in place. One more tomorrow morning, and others Monday morning, sorry. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Moved forward. Public art placement, 10.7. Motion to receive the report. Thank you, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Shanks. All those in favor? Report is fairly straightforward. Were we looking for any speaking to it from the Communications, Arts, Culture and Communications Coordinator? Or will we leave her off the hook? Councillor Seegers?
Shit, I think my mic was on first there.
Oh, sorry.
I had a question, something that was in my mind after the catastrophe relating to that art piece, and I'm just curious about the second log, the one that fell down, if that is the original piece that was a part of the arts festival last year.
All of that to say yes, it was. Yes.
It's the exact log that was there last year, because the foundations were so different. It made me think that perhaps it was different.
Yeah, it had never had the same foundation as the one piece. It was a decision made by the artist at the time when they were putting it together for the festival that only the one would have the steel plate, unfortunately. So
yeah, the only reason why I ask is that there was some confusion about that piece. It was taken away, it was modified. There was some talk about half of it going somewhere else, and then it comes back, and one is substantially differently constructed than the one right next to it. So we are certain that that's the piece.
yes, so the part that fell down is the part that had always been there since the festival.
Okay, thanks.
Any discussion, or let's then look to the, there's Councillor Seegers, sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, back to the page. So the recommendation that you're making is that we pick option 1, and yet when I look at the recommendations or the 3 different options, what I note is that option 3 is very similar to the others, off to the side, would not include the circular base, but would retain the use of the square that option 1 does not allow. So in the conclusion, it says, recommends that sculpture regeneration by artist Gordon Halloran be permanently installed at the center as outlined in 1, because it best meets the needs and wants of the artist, general public, District of Sechelt staff, and Spirit Square user groups. So the conclusion, to my mind, doesn't fit the options that were presented. I would say option 3 actually would fit that better, given some of the other comments that are made in the option choices themselves. Did you comment?
Before I comment, could you just let me know what in particular you thought would not lead you to conclude that? Like which particular aspects of the installation?
Thank you. If you turn to page 48, under option 1, it says this option will change the functionality of the square, requiring that large gatherings or events take place around the sculpture. So the placement will impact sightlines, it will require user groups to be flexible in their setup requirements. So option 1, which is the recommendation, actually is changing the use of Spirit Square, whereas option 3 does not.
Okay. So it is changing it, but it's not changing it for the worse. When we did ask what types of user groups and what types of events had been held there in the past, as outlined in the report, is very few. And of the ones that had been held there, almost all of them could have been held there in the same way. If something had been in the middle of that spot, it wouldn't have prevented the event from taking place, nor would it have significantly changed the event. There are a couple of things that would not have worked, but they're not events that are happening again in the future. The lawn area, in comparison, gets quite a bit of use by large groups and could still be used for large groups. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of history to suggest that this space is actually being used for large gatherings in a way that would be prevented from happening in the future. Since the report was submitted, there was one user group that we had made contact with and tried to find out what they were planning to do in the future. And we weren't able to obtain detailed information until after the report was submitted. And that is the dry grad for Chattelich secondary students. They make use of quite a bit of area here in front of the aquatic center and around the Seaside Center, I believe even possibly inside the Seaside Center and around the parking lot area. They're probably the one user group that we know of for sure that makes use of that space and could actually have to change their plans potentially if the sculpture remains where it is. Because the nature of their event is such that they in recent years have typically rented a piece of equipment that's akin to a bouncy castle, and it needs to be set up on level ground, and so the grassy area is not ideal for that. However, when I spoke with one of the organizers, they did think there would be other solutions if the sculpture was to remain where it was. And so far, that's been the only specific example that I could find. I would like to suggest that if the square is not being used quite a bit in comparison, especially to the Seaside Center and the grassy area next to it, that perhaps if there was a feature element or something that would draw people to it, perhaps it would encourage greater use of the area. Granted, not for hundreds of people to stand in the middle of it, perhaps, but for other uses as a gathering point, which is what the square was originally intended to be.
Right, so I'm not in favor of option 2, definitely. That's the grass. I'm not in favor of actually having the sculpture be on the grass, but I would lean more to option 3 than option 1. It still takes it, puts it on Spirit Square, but moves it off to the side and allows it to be a multi-use space without having to have users modify their plans for the space.
Okay. I would say to that moving it to the side, it does change the impact of the piece and the way in which people will receive the piece and understand it. And so it does, from my perspective, send the message that this is something that is in our way and we need to find a way to move it out of the way, which might be what we're saying, but I don't know that that is appropriate in this situation. I would also like to suggest that a large-scale work of public art should be something that has a monumental sense to it in some way, and sticking something off to the side doesn't have that same feeling to it. It would also significantly change the look of the base of it, and potentially the way in which people would then view the piece and interact with it. There isn't as much space over to the side. There isn't. It's the only part off to the side. Oops, sorry. That where it would fit, but it just barely fits.
Okay, I recognize Councillor Lutz and then Councillor Wright, but just in that discussion from the questions, what I heard that summary was that in fact staff had done what they had been asked to do, go back and look at this. They'd looked at several elements, including the artist's intent, the public accessibility, safety, aesthetic concerns, cost, guidelines, priorities identified in the district's official community plans, and then summarizing all of those. Option one was the balance that they thought was there. So it wasn't any specific thing. Option 1, 2, and 3, they showed some weaknesses and some strengths, but summarizing all of them together is why they came back to option 1. Councillor Lutz.
All along, I've spoken in favor of what is showing to be option 2. I think it would fit nicer into the landscape with grass rather than bricks. I like the idea that it's visible from Toreto Street. We've talked often about how we need something to draw people in to our community, and there's been a lot of talk, and I think when we actually dedicate this piece, to be able to spot it as visitors coming through our community, I think that has some advantages. It says that it wouldn't be visible from the visitor's center, but I can see the entryway in the picture to the visitor's center. So I would think they would also be able to see the artwork. I like the idea that there's a bench nearby to view it. I just really like option 2 the best.
And Councillor Wright.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. In your report on page 53, you said that options 1 and 2 would require more extensive landscaping and would be therefore more costly than option 3. Do you have any sense of what the difference in cost would be?
Yes. Well, it's approximate, but we're looking at in the neighborhood of between $1,000 and $2,000 more to do option 1 or 2 than to do option 3.
$1,000 to $2,000. Okay, thank you.
And further discussion, Councillor Inkster, and then I'll put myself on the list. Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, thank you. I was waiting until others had spoken on this. I've spoken about this before. I know what Spirit Square was intended to represent. I know what Spirit Square was in. Actually, it could become Spirit Scare now. But anyway, I know what it was intended to represent to our community, what it was intended to host, and we've had a number of events there. If in fact we put something in the middle, we may not have the potential to have those similar events and or ideas for events that use that piece. And like I said, I'll reiterate, I know what the square was for. It was to be an open square. We don't have tables in the middle of it now. They're off to the side. We don't have the water feature in the middle or on the brick area. We don't have any of the features. They're off to the side because the square was intended to be an open square. I'm glad that other council members are looking at other options, because I think we should consider other options, because once it's done, and the square doesn't have the same potential for the gathering or uses. We've talked about looking at other gathering spaces, but we've also talked about, very similar to and a corollary to that, that we don't have a lot of financial options. So if in fact this council is unable to find another gathering space or another square sense in this community this term, I think it would behoove us to leave the existing square that was designed for a gathering place in one piece until we can get to that. I won't be supporting this. I was just there the other day, standing around it. I've stood in the middle before and seen other people stand in the middle, including tourist groups stand in the middle as they talk. I mean, it's not as formal as the research that's been done, but I've seen tour groups and gatherings of people because I do some things nearby that stand in the middle of the square to discuss what they're going to do on the Sunshine Coast. I thank Siobhan for her report. I've talked to her personally about this, and I know she's put a lot of effort into this, but there was some leanings towards the center previously. I thank her for her report, but I don't agree. I think that we should look at other options other than putting something in the middle of our Spirit Square.
And I don't think I could disagree more strongly, so I may as well speak to it. What I've seen in the last 15 minutes is the best demonstration for why we should have an Arts Advisory Committee and not let elected officials start tinkering around with public art and how public art should be placed. I think because elected officials simply don't bring the comprehensive understanding of public space and art to the discussion. Every single major square in Europe that is a people gathering place has art objects in it, in the center, around it, and through it, and they don't inhibit mass demonstrations or mass gatherings or mass celebrations. And I can easily see 1,000 people in and around Spirit Square and not being impeded by the fact that there's a fairly significant and community-supported piece of art in the only location that makes aesthetic sense. Putting it off into any other place, it is not simply a piece of art like a picture on a wall that you can move to another wall and think it suits the same purpose. It was designed and it works as an object in place. And that is just so obvious when you see it there and when you saw it falling. I can't imagine how it would impede tourists, a large gathering. The only thing it might impede was if somebody wanted to put a tent or a barbecue tent right in the middle of the square, which I don't think is what it was intended for, Spirit Square. So I'm firmly and very strongly in support of option one, and in large part because I don't think elected officials should be getting into these kind of disputes and discussions about public art. We should, in fact, allow that to go. We should support it. We should give them money. We should allow the artistic community and staff to guide us through that rather than elected officials, because I don't think we'd agree in a month of Sundays on the aesthetic issues around this. Councillor Mueller.
Thank you, Worship. I wanted to thank our arts and culture coordinator for doing the extensive work that we have asked them to do around this. I'm going to repeat my comments that I made before, which were that I had a reaction to this art piece as a part of the Sechelt Art Festival, and I voted for that specific piece in that specific area because that's what I reacted to. And I think it really does fill the square out, and it does give a nod to one of this town's most pressing emergencies, which was the wildfire. And I have no problem whatsoever of it being the focal point of a public square. Thanks.
And Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, not voicing my opinion specific to this, but
sorry. I didn't have your mic.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, not basing my comments specific to this, but if we were to go along that theme, Your Worship, we have a piece of art out front here where I'm surprised that nobody has impaled themselves on it, simply because of its design. And I, time and time again, see youngsters playing on it, and I'm amazed that nobody has had an injury on it. So just a comment about if we're going to leave everything up to the arts community in terms of where it looks best and where it should be located and everything else, I would have some problem overall with that suggestion.
But the fact is, nobody has impaled themselves on that dangerous piece of art.
So how long are we gonna wait until it happens? Excuse me.
Yeah. Councillor Wright. Yeah. And then we'll try and bring some closure to this.
Thank you, Worship. I also voted for this piece of art to stay where it currently is located. And to that end, I would like to move the recommendation.
Can I actually make a quick comment first? Is that appropriate or no?
No, we'll give you a chance. If I can get a seconder to the motion. And it's on the floor with a second by Councillor Lutz. Yes, I know you're going to speak against it. And a comment.
Just in regards to Councillor Lutz's mention of visibility from the visitor centre, it was actually the staff at the visitor centre who said that they had thought that it would be more visible. And the reason being, the entrance to the visitor centre faces, you'll see it on page 48, it faces that square. And they find that visitors typically enter the visitor centre from the parking lot that's sort of on the mall side. And so although people using the Seaside Centre would have a better sight line of the sculpture if it were in the grass, tourists entering the visitor centre are more likely to walk past and then be able to view from the visitor centre itself into the square. Just the way that it's set up, they typically orient themselves with their back to the lawn. So it's not as visible. They would have to make a point of sort of leaning towards the windows to look out and see it, if that makes sense.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. We have 2 opposed. We have 3 in favor and 2 that are wondering. So is there further discussion needed, or should we just call a vote and let the chips fall where they may? If we're ready for the vote, all those in favor? That's 4. And all those opposed? 3. That's carried for now. I still go back. I'd prefer not to see those kind of divisions on council. And I think one of the ways to solve that is to put public art at arm's length. I think we do that for reasons at federal and provincial levels because of those divisions. So thank you for all your work, Siobhan. And let's be clear, you cannot bind future councils, and a future council can come along and change your budget and move your art. It might be an election issue. I've seen elections fought on less substantive issues. Yeah. That would be public engagement of a high order if we had an election on public art. Item 10.9 of the original agenda is adjustments to meeting start times, and we have it's a verbal report that was to come, I think, from our corporate officer, and it was with reference to our closed meetings on Wednesday and our finance, the meeting that we today started at 1 o'clock. If we're not prepared, we can say that we're not prepared. Okay, and that's connected to our procedures bylaw, which we were looking at as well. So I wasn't sure why it was here separately, because it is part of the procedures bylaw. And the discussion was, given that we're having so many afternoon meetings closed to the public, that we actually move it forward so there was time between the 2 meetings. And I'll leave it at that. But if you'd asked me 18 months ago if we would have had to have a discussion on the number of closed meetings, I would have been shocked. Mr. Palmer.
Your Worship, I'm going to suggest that this be referred to the next Finance, Culture, and Economic Development Committee meeting. I can't remember specifically what Jerry had, but that might be a better venue for having that discussion.
Okay, motion to refer, Councillor Seegers, seconded by Councillor Wright. No debate on a motion to refer. All those in favor? That's carried. Moving on then to item 11.1, which is reports from council. And I'll start on my far left, if that's okay. Councillor Mueller.
Thank you, Worship. Over the past 2 weeks and a little bit, we have conducted interviews for our final director position, and as well, we've had a meeting with the Regional Dev Steering Committee. There's going to be one more additional meeting, but essentially both of those extracurricular activities of mine are coming to a close. They're near complete, and so I'll be turning my attention perhaps to some other extracurricular activities. I'm hoping that they will be infrastructure deficit related, or perhaps related to financial realignment, but let the mayor give me an indication on that. And yeah, I attended the other meetings with the other councillors, but those are the two issues that have been different. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Lutz.
I'll be quick. A lot of meetings and 2 conferences and an annual general meeting for the Chamber of Commerce. I'll have things to remind the community of at our next council meeting.
And Councillor Shanks.
I'll be quick as well. Basically, attendance at the annual general meeting of the Chamber of Commerce, where the mayor installed all the new officers, and then my attendance at the AVICC conference in Nanaimo this last weekend, where there's some excellent sessions, reconciliation, legal issues in dealing with native issues, and a new school of thought in terms of social procurement, which was very enlightening for a lot of us, and really enjoyed the workshops. I thought they were excellent. Haven't always enjoyed them, but they were exceptionally good, I thought. And we were entertained by a group called the Time Benders, whereupon Roy Orbison and Buddy Holly and ABBA and a few other groups made their appearance. And that group is coming to the community center down in Gibsons towards the end of the month. If anybody's interested, they put on a good show. That's all.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, it's a good advert for the show. Encourage everyone to go, because they did all ages, obviously an all ages show, the way they did it. In terms of things that have happened over the last couple of weeks, I did quite a lengthy walk in the forest with ALF. They provided me with a list of things that they had provided to the mayor a number of months ago. I guess I just looked at the list and have to talk to the mayor about that list and see where we're at with those things. I had a meeting with Katie from the lawn bowling, and when I met with her, encouragement. It's always encouraging with of Katie and that group to look at a resolution to that issue, but I also asked for any documents she may have that council or myself have not seen, and she was going in her box, as she said, and going to provide me with the information that I requested in the next couple of weeks. And if it's really pertinent and helpful, I will get documents photocopied and passed on to the rest of council. Just wanted to quickly mention a very quick Columbia Institute convention almost 2 weeks ago now. And one of the things that they talked about there, which was, you know, every year we talk about generally we talk about sustainability issues and green issues. And a couple of things that were really interesting is how to look at retrofitting our buildings and how to look at insulation issues in our buildings in order to make them more energy efficient. And they will come and look at our buildings just upon request, this individual who looks at retrofitting, and they will for free, and they will tell us how we can look at retrofitting in order to look at cost savings. Now, if most of our buildings are electrical and hydroelectric in nature of heat generation, etc., we should probably look at taking these people up on how to look at our buildings and making them more energy efficient as we predict that the rates will go up. So that was important piece of the presentation that I received there. It's something council should really strongly consider, because as I said, they'll do it for free. The other one that they talked about was building and rebuilding community. That I think that was something that was really important to Councillor Lutz and ourselves, is how do you make sure that you enhance your community. And One thing I would say that we all should do more of, and it's an encouragement to those that are here on council and in the audience, is acts of kindness. And we talked about it a few years ago, random acts of kindness and passing it forward, but just things to help people that need help. Before I went, I helped somebody whose car stopped in the middle of the road, a woman, and she couldn't move it. So I told her to take her emergency brake off, put it in I guess it's neutral, and I pushed her probably 100 feet to get her out of the way of the middle of the road. And she was so thankful, but how easy is that to do, to just pull over and help people in your community? And it builds community. So just encourage everyone to, if they think they're too busy, just to always consider that there's other people that may need help around them. AVICC was a good convention this time. The resolutions, a number of them didn't really apply to the Sunshine Coast like they do. One of them was railroads. But I guess the good thing for everyone out the other end is there's a corridor there, so that if it doesn't, the railroad doesn't come to fruition, which, sad to say, I doubt it will. At least they have a corridor that they can put buses on, bicycles on, and or walking, so that they can get people off the road. The presentations on social capital were good, and I hope council members brought back some information on that, because it's a sort of a new area that we should be looking at. Public tax presentation, how to get your community more interested in your budget and any tax changes that may occur, because sometimes you don't hear from the community until you bring in a 6% tax increase, and yet there were budget process of 6 months previous to that talking about it. And then the final thing I wanted to mention was, other than a quick ride on that train that I referred to, I did a tour at the very beginning, early in the morning, of the Tilray production facility, the marijuana production facility over there, medical marijuana, and very high security, fencing and buzz-ins and security everywhere, just to look at their process from starting with plants and how they farm them in order to, out the other end, send out orders to those that have approved doctor notes or electronic recommendations to have the product sent to them within 2 to 3 days. So, and I think there was 130 people that worked at the facility. Looks like a very expensively put together facility with a lot of looked like a lot of science in the building as well. So that I'm glad I went, and it was really interesting, and I can tell people about it, even though there's probably videos out there as well on the facility. Thank you.
And I noticed you got a gift from Tilray. I hope it was declared.
Thank you for declaring it for me. Yes, there it is. Yeah, a leather book.
That's the one we can see.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. In an effort to be brief and not repetitive, on behalf of the Regional District, I attended 4 meetings over the last couple of weeks. On behalf of the District of Sechelt, a variety of open houses, public hearings, and committee meetings, total of 13 meetings. And I spent Friday, Saturday, and a portion of Sunday at AVIC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Yes, a number of meetings over the last few weeks. Seniors Planning Table, Housing Committee, etc. There's some focus and direction now looking at the age-friendly community report that is to come forward. So there will be some workshops and things coming forward in the community. Watch for those dates and times and locations. I attended the Goldsmith Jones open house. One of the topics under discussion was wood fiber LNG. Lots of questions from the community on that. Other than that, library board meeting. A lot of us attended the open houses with regards to the sewer. A lot of us attended those in the last couple of weeks too. Nice to see the public come out and take an interest in what's happening in their areas. One other one, McDonald's open door. McDonald, my son, who's now like in his early 30s, started his first job was at McDonald's, and I've always been amazed at their training program that they have for young people. And there were a couple of people in our community who showed up because their kids now work there, and it's amazing. It's amazing customer service training that they get. It doesn't matter what age they are; they're acknowledged for the effort they put in, the learning that they do, and they're given more and more responsibility as they move through. So they're, whatever you say about other stuff, their training program's amazing. And I just want to acknowledge them for that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And on the last note, I'll just remind councillors that Mike and the team at McDonald's will be looking for volunteers to help out in their Ronald McDonald Day, and there's lots of room for those who sign up for that. Moving on, I think most of the items that I was involved in have been mentioned, the AVICC and other conferences, and Councillor Mueller, final council report.
Sorry, Your Worship. I omitted something rather large off my council report, and I noticed that other councillors didn't mention it, but it was in fact a large event for District of Sechelt staff, and that was the April Fool's Run that Councillor Inkster and Councillor Mike Shanks, myself, and our new CAO, Tim Palmer, did. We had quite a large contingent at that event, and I know that we had a great time. It was a good team building event, and so I think next year we'll be going back, and my personal hope is that maybe we can extend the run a little bit. We each split up the 21 kilometers and did a quarter of it, but I think I was feeling pretty good at the end of it. Could have done a bit more, so for next year.
Yeah, people are starting their training. That's good. Moving on to 11.2, the SCRD board report. The report is in print and circulated. Councillor Lutz.
Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Moving on to item 12.1, which is council correspondence. We have 6 items on this correspondence package. I'd like to pull out item 2. Just make a reference, item 3 is passed, but we did actually submit some information to them on their Green Champion Awards. Iced tea is an invitation. AVICC is stale dated, and climate change is a letter from the minister encouraging us to all participate. But item 2 actually requires some discussion and input from council, and it's the annual identification of priorities for the District of Sechelt, so that the RCMP has a sense of what our priorities to do are. And I'd look to councillors to look at the middle paragraph there, where our previous priorities were traffic enforcement, road safety, police visibility, and community safety and property crime, and whether there's any comments on the priorities. Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. These particular priorities and categories have rarely changed over the last number of years. They're fairly broad, each of them, but within them there's something that I would like to identify, and I have mentioned to yourself, and that is I've received a number of complaints about traffic running up and down Mason Road in West Sechelt. And as many people that live in Sechelt know, and those that live up there as residents, it's kind of what would be considered a rural area with domestic animals. And with the paving, what I've been hearing from some of the people in the neighborhood, keep hearing from one individual, but I've heard from others that live all up and down Mason from the crossing at Norwest Bay all the way up, that there's been an increase in speedier traffic up through there with the paving of the road. It's more of a lengthier drag strip, and I think people have talked about that, and there was some fears that that may occur with the paving. And I'm just hearing from people that have domestic animals and any of those that even have dogs that are spooked by traffic, and sometimes they run the wrong way into it. That's tragic, but we're dealing with larger animals here, horses and such, that are being spooked, and even if they, and as we know, a lot of them walk or ride their horses up and down that road, because it's of course an access point to other areas and other trails. So I would like to ask council what we can do about that. I would suggest that we contact the RCMP to have them do some form of enforcement and or speed watch in order to deal with those complaints and anything else that may be suggested. The infrastructure suggestion by a couple was to put speed bumps and or sleeping policemen up there, which is a larger, wider speed bump. But I'm not sure if we want to start putting speed bumps throughout the district once fast cars are identified. So I would hope we look at enforcement to start. Thank you.
Well, at the very least, we could be specific that traffic enforcement, road safety be traffic enforcement of speed on District of Sechelt roads. If councillors agreed with that, that's one way of moving forward. Councillor Mueller?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I'm not sure exactly how to raise this or what discussion around it. I do recall the other day driving past Davis Bay Pier, and if I wasn't mistaken, it was an RCMP officer there policing fishing. And to anybody who's had their eye to it, it's what appears to be a commercial fishery on that particular dock as well as other docks. And we do know that the conservation staff are chronically underfunded. There's only one for the entire Sunshine Coast. And I'm just curious if that is a policy that's changed or exactly what is going on with that, just so we know with some clarity if that will be continuing and how.
The policy in terms of having RCMP look at these issues, or I've never heard of them actually enforcing conservation issues, but it's a good idea.
I hadn't heard of it either, but then I saw it and I thought, well, that makes some sense. We do have an enforcement issue, so it may be just something to note in whatever goes forward to them.
Yeah. So police visibility would not just be the downtown core, but on lakes and rivers and wharves where there's fishing. Mm-hmm. Any other? I'm not sure how to raise what I was going to mention as well. I think there should be a comment in the next letter to the RCMP when we outline our priorities. And in this case, we've mentioned speed on District of Sechelt roads, and we're mentioning visibility on other federal laws. I think there should be a note to the RCMP, not in terms of their priorities, but what should not be a priority. And I take this from a situation that arose a couple of months ago, and Councillor Mueller actually spoke most strongly to it at the time of the council meeting, and I think in his council report. But there are laws of the land that are currently under review and changing as we speak on the advice of the Prime Minister. And I would think that those laws, as they affect adults in the community, should not be a priority of the RCMP. And I think we could signal the values of our community and the values of the federal government by suggesting that they take some things as high priorities and serious, and other things they should see as not the highest priorities for their activities. I don't quite know how to word that or whether we should, but I certainly want to mention it. Any further discussion of our priorities in the letter that we'll send them, response by letter or scanned? Maybe we should have a letter drafted so that we can actually. We've heard some comments and things. Any final comments? And then what I'd actually look for is that we refer this to staff for drafting a letter of response. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Inkster.
Question.
Yep. Councillor Inkster.
So does this letter come back to, will this come back to council, and then if we approve it, so well, actually, maybe is it next week?
It could be next week.
Yeah, good. So it will come back, and then if we don't make any changes, it will go very quickly to the RCMP to look at that particular issue, which has been ongoing for, I get an email now every couple of days about traffic, so.
Well, it's not going to go away. And in the spring and early summer, it'll probably pick up, so.
Okay, well, at least, so hopefully it'll go to them soon to maybe have some form of presence in the upper area there in a week or so. That's what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thought it'd be just based on your comments, some recent meeting I've had with the RCMP, or staff have had with the RCMP regarding enforcement of federal laws regarding marijuana specifically. It was a good meeting because the RCMP had concerns about concerns of putting too much effort in an area that's in a moving target as far as federal legislation, and the relevance of this is the release of the earlier in this meeting, the release of the in-camera discussion, and that the RCMP indicated that they were pleased that we're looking at the regulatory aspects of within our framework, not interfering at all at the federal level, but as the regulatory part for regulating where types of businesses, and including possibly emerging businesses in the future.
Thank you for those comments. And I referred this to staff only because we didn't have time to get a full understanding, but we should see what our priorities are. So that'll come back to us probably on April 6th, if we can. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. I meant April 20th. Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. On page 69, or sorry, page 60, the letter from this group, Sandy Hook, there's a comment, and it's almost as if we do not reply or request something further from them, they're going to take it that we confirm their actions. So on the top of page 60, letter B, it says the District of Sechelt shall, after review, confirm in writing that the current agreement between the society and the district extends to this new project, but a reasonable delay in the confirmation need not delay advancing the project, provided an absolute denial is not received. So I would like us to have staff perhaps contact them and have them request in writing what they would like from us, so that they don't assume that we're approving it by saying nothing.
I think if you read that in context, they're passing a motion at their AGM.
Yes.
And they'll have to follow through on that. One of those being that they're not going to start unless they have, in fact, contacted the District of Sechelt and have in writing the extension of the agreement. It doesn't read that they're going to just go ahead to do that. They're in fact saying they won't go ahead unless they have in writing at least not an outright denial. So I think they're suggesting if they're still in negotiation, they can get started.
Okay.
So
I just didn't find it clear.
I don't want us to start doing things for groups when they have to do it.
Okay.
So
see what happens. And then with regards to the FCM awards, you indicated that we have applied and sent somebody in, or some name in or something?
No, the deadline was for March 7th.
It was actually extended to the 15th in some of the later information that we were sent.
Yeah, and I thought it was the 8th.
It indicates that in this. This is old documentation that we received from them. We have received newer information that the deadline was extended to February 15th, which is this Friday.
That's what's there now. No, it was extended until Friday, April 8th, 2016.
Sorry, April 15th.
Interesting, because the email from Jacka was on the 8th. So anyways, with our concern with that, meeting that deadline, I had said we don't have any information on individuals, but we could provide more information on the District of Sechelt.
We are automatically, from what I understand from what it says here, is that because we won an award, we as the District of Sechelt are automatically entered into that, right?
The only people who can be entered are those who won the award, so there's a number of those.
Yes.
But they specifically asked for an update or additional information that they wouldn't have on the website, other things that we could provide.
Okay.
So that's the part that we asked staff to do.
Okay, so I was hoping this would come up at the last meeting, which it didn't because we didn't get to it. But I would like to put forward Paul Nash as a recipient for the individual award, given how much time and energy and expertise he provided in shepherding this project through to completion and afterwards.
We'll first see if there's a second to that. Councillor Shanks, discussion of, we've heard one reason why that name should be presented. Any other discussion? I actually phoned the individuals involved in this award, first to ask them why they had changed their deadline and what emails they'd had in asking for a change in the definition, because it used to say that it had to be a currently employed individual And that was changed. And that was changed in part based on an email from a councillor in the district of Sechelt. So I thought that was interesting. I wanted to know that, and I wanted councillors to know that. Their notion of what the individual should be, because I had some discussion in terms of, for example, Manny Machado from Gibson's, is in fact an individual that has a long-standing contribution on, and it's to recognize things they've done other than the one project. So that would be my main concern. My other concern is that I would find it difficult to support Mr. Nash as a green champion in this community. I don't know what others want to say. Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, this was briefly mentioned to me the other day. But my perspective, although there's a shadow hanging over Mr. Nash in terms of his employment as regards this project, I personally, setting that aside, thought he did a fairly outstanding job in terms of enlightening the public as regards that particular facility, and that's where my emphasis was coming from. If you attended any of those presentations at the wastewater treatment plant, he was always available for tours and one thing and another, and was a wealth of information for those people that did attend those open houses. So,
Councillor Inkster.
Okay, so I'm a little confused here when you said that the criteria changed because of a specific request. I didn't know about that because I saw the dates change and I didn't know that it occurred. What was the original rationale for it, and was the argument strong enough to change their rationale? It seems strange that an individual request would change the rationale and the dating on it.
Well, they had not the date. Date has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Okay.
The original criteria had assumed that the people involved in these projects would likely still be either on council or on staff. And in contract situations, of course, that doesn't occur. I didn't have a discussion on their full rationale, but they thought about it and said, no, there's no reason if a municipality wants to put forward the name, for example, of a former mayor, that they couldn't do that if that person was seen in their community as a champion of the environment. Similarly, a former contract or a former employee. And the question for their criteria is just the specificity of the activities and the breadth of their activities and that. So that they didn't, my understanding is there was nothing I would consider to be undue pressure. There was, or even strong arguments, but it was an email from our council that had them reconsider the issue and thought it through. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Yes, that was me that sent that, as you've probably found out. When this came out, I sent one email with one line that said, does the person nominated have to be still working for or on council as an elected official? That was it. And they went off and came back with, I guess it had never come up for them before. And so that was, they went ahead and looked at it and came back and said, no, they didn't see any rationale why it couldn't be.
Yeah, I think it actually had come up in the past, but they, in the context of that, revisited. But yeah. Councillor Inkster.
So when is just to clarify, because I thought this had passed, when is the new deadline? I mean, I'd like to give some thought to demonstrated leadership, innovation, and commitment. I mean, if that individual may meet those, it's just, when yourself and I talked about it, I was looking at some other situations, so this is sort of...
Yeah, I thought of that as well. I thought the deadline was passed. Ms. Jordison, can you help us on the deadline and from what the emails were? Sorry.
I believe the individual category has been extended to the 15th, as it indicates here.
Okay.
I haven't received any additional extensions as far as I'm aware.
Okay, so that's on page 447 of the original. Okay, yep. I didn't see that. I didn't see that in the emails that I was reading. So we have a suggestion on the floor, and that the District of Sechelt would in fact put forward the name of Mr. Paul Nash for demonstrated leadership, innovation, and commitment to sustainable development within our municipality. Councillor Mueller.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to our CAO, the amount of time required in this application would be somewhat minimal. Is that correct? You have a ballpark of how much time that would take?
Your Worship, I couldn't categorize it as minimal. I don't know how the full extent to make a good application. I would need to find the appropriate staff. It probably would involve a few staff members to pull together the information. I couldn't say exactly how much time, but if council resolves that, then we have a very short time frame here as well to turn it around.
And the only reason why I bring that up is the cost associated with this type of application. Everybody knows the district is not exactly rolling in time or additional resources. However, as a general principle, I think our staff deserve to be congratulated whatever way for their work. As long as it's not a hindrance to our daily operation, I'm okay with that.
Councillor Darren Inkster.
Yeah, do they do this? They do these awards every year?
Yes, but you can only submit names if you've been awarded the sustainability awards that happened in February.
Has to be the same year.
Yeah.
Of that award.
And it can be somebody from the general broader community. For example, it was suggested that the person who wrote our sustainability plan might be considered, but they should have some connection to the project itself that won the award. So there has to be some link. What they're looking for is somebody not who was brought in for a project and did it, but somebody who has a long-standing champion of green issues in their community. So Manny Machado seems to fit that criteria. Mm-hmm. But I don't think if he was involved in this project, it was only on his way out, only on his way out. You know, in fact, he was excluded from those, I'm sure. Mr. Nash was obviously deeply involved in the project in a contract basis, but in a very different way, and not particularly well known for things outside of that project.
Yeah.
So that's
I guess I'm taking a narrow viewpoint.
Yeah. So we've heard one name put forward, and we've heard a suggestion that the strength of that is on the basis of the open houses and the information that was provided. Is there any other discussion on this issue before I call for a vote of support? Okay. All those in favor of the motion in front of us put forward by Councillor Seeger, seconded by Councillor Shanks, that we nominate Mr. Paul Nash for this award. All those opposed? Can I count that again? Because I
was defeated.
I'm not sure because I saw two hands go up twice. All those in favor? That's 3. All those opposed? Okay, that is defeated.
Mike was in favor.
Any other names? Which is why I thought it was in the best interest of the district simply to put our municipality forward in a general sense rather than individuals in this particular case. I thought the individuals were, there's still too much controversy. Finally, we get to, is there anything else on the council correspondence? Councillor Mueller on council correspondence.
I just wanted to make mention of item 6, which is a response to the email that we sent, or the official letter that we sent to Catherine McKenna, Minister of Environment, related to the outcome of the Paris negotiations and our new International Climate Pact. It was great to get a response from her. Perhaps we should invite her in her next BC trip to Sechelt.
Making a motion?
That's a good idea. All those in favor?
Seconded by
Sure. Moving on from correspondence and to the last item on the agenda, and thank you again for being patient as you were last Wednesday night, Ms. Pattison. We have a report from John Hart on item 10.2, which is a building bylaw contravention notice on property. And I'm just looking at the clock and saying, if this had still been last Wednesday night, it would be 5 minutes past midnight. We spent an hour and 35 minutes today. We spent an hour and a half, 3.5 hours that night. We simply tells us that that agenda, when it came forward, was not even close to. First, Mr. Hart, we have a motion to receive. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Inkster. All those in favor? Mr. Hart, would you like to speak to the report, or do we not need to? No? Okay. We've read it. The motion then is that the corporate officer be directed to file notice on title, and that in accordance with Section 58 of the Community Charter, upon confirmation from the building inspector that all outstanding issues are resolved, etc., the notice may be discharged from the title upon receipt of the required fee. So can I have somebody put the motion forward? Councillor Lutz and Councillor Shanks. Sure.
That's fine. There's a motion on the table. I'm just going to suggest that we take a brief recess. It's been quite a lengthy period of time. If that's acceptable, just a 5-minute washroom break for staff.
Okay. Those kind of breaks are always in order. So I'll ask for 5 minutes, which will get us back here at 20 to 5, I hope. Okay, short break. Yeah. where did Jerry go?
Actually, a single lady that's invited me over for supper. I said, oh, good for you.
Now, we've lost our interlocutor.
So, oh, that's telling us something. I can appreciate it.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you for that break. I reconvene the meeting and call it to order. And though it caught me by surprise, it was probably a good suggestion. We have a motion on the floor, and I wanted that motion on the floor. However, before we consider the motion, it's one of the requirements that we allow the individual who's named in the notice, or the property owner, to have an opportunity to speak to the issue. And Jerry Patterson is with us today to speak to it. It's our role and responsibility to give you an opportunity to be heard. As you know, you and I probably have a different understanding of what the right to be heard means and how that will play out. So it'll be up to you and I to manage this in a respectful way for council and community, so that I chair the meeting to keep on topic and speaking to the notice, and that you are heard in a way that allows your understanding of the situation to be addressed. But that doesn't mean that we're to sit for an unscheduled amount of time just because you feel you want to talk about it. So it is important for you to be heard, and we'll do that. But I urge you to focus on the notice of title and the building bylaw contravention, which is the subject of the motion. Thank you. And I'll turn it to you and so on.
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Jerry Patterson, and I'm the registered owner of 6708 Norwest Bay Road in the district of Sechelt, British Columbia. I would like the permission of the chair, Mayor Milne, to approach to give each of the members of council and staff, as well as members of the media, copy of documents that I will be referring to. They're my exhibits. If the district had provided me opportunity, I would have provided these documents previously so that they could have been, as they should have been, included in the agenda. So could I have your permission to proceed?
You're welcome to distribute them now, and we won't count this as time. In fact, somebody should help. I'll take one. Linda's got some.
With him.
He's okay. People are anxiously leafing through it to see what's there. I'll let them do that. Thank you.
Your Honor's permission is that, having done many presentations in life, is that rather than speaking in competition to people flipping through pages, could I just give you a couple of minutes to quickly look through, and then I would really, really like you to pay attention to me.
Good, and I'll make a small, modest correction that Your Honor is kept for judges and sometimes cabinet ministers, honorable cabinet ministers, but Mere mayors are best as Mayor Milne. Unless you're on council, then they have this extra rule to use your worship. But we're not allowed to use that outside of council, and I don't expect the community or people at home to use that one. Yeah.
So members of council and Mayor Milne, as well as staff, members of the media, and the public. As I've stated, my name is Jerry Patterson. I'm the current registered owner of 6708 Norwest Bay Road, located in the district of Sechelt. I became the registered owner of that property in December 2009. So many of the dates that are referred to in the report and co-authored by the District of Sechelt's technical assistant, Jane Whittleton, and John Hart, are dates that I actually was not the registered owner. The exhibits I've given you are just a small sample of the documents that I have. Many that I've received directly from the District of Sechelt and FOI responses, documents I've received directly from trades, professionals, others, and I have selected just a few because, well, I guess there's 77 pages, but I've selected those documents as a representation of the documents that are in my possession. And the ones that I have chosen I chose specifically in an effort to be able to address and rebut the documents that were produced by the District of Sechelt's Jane Whittleton, John Hart, and Jerry Vanderwolf. You will note in the documents, which has actually turned out to be good, seems we've got a couple of different agendas, is that I have put a number on the upper right-hand corner and circled it. And so when I'm referring to a page number, that will be the page number that I will be referring to. So I think, as most people in the room realize, is that the matter that's before council today, being provincial legislation, the community charter, section 57, notice on title, is a serious matter. And so during my presentation, I really am asking, please listen to what I'm saying. If at any time you don't understand what I'm saying or don't understand the meaning of what I'm saying, put your hand up. I can answer your questions. One of the things that's important, and perhaps, is that whoever's looking after the audio visuals, is that they could move to what I, in my documents, have referred to as page 8. And it was in the district's former agenda as page 393. For those that are looking at the exhibit that I provided, is that this is an excerpt provided by the district's interim corporate officer, Jerry Vanderwolf, with his letter, which is a notice against land title that building regulations contravened. So I'm just waiting for
we have it in front
staff
of us
to get to that. One of the reasons that I want to review this legislation in great detail with council this evening is, unfortunately, previously, in 2013, in the agendas of October 16th, 2013 and November 6th, 2013, it is well documented that the council at that time voted in violation of the legislation commonly known as Section 57 of the Community Charter to place notice on title. And what the contraventions that occurred at that time, they occurred, and there was my property as well as 2 other properties that were negatively impacted by that. In that case, is that the then corporate officer, Margie Nicholas, wrote reports and presented them to council, upon which she had them vote. Now, that is in clear violation of the legislation. The legislation requires a report from the building inspector. So that was a serious issue. But in addition to that, in my particular case, and I can't speak to the other two property owners that unlawfully had Section 57s placed on their property in October of 2013, but in my case, I also was not served with notice. So I didn't have an opportunity to be heard or to speak or to present the facts. What occurred after that was an incredible amount of time, effort, communications, which some of current council are aware of because they were copied on the communications, in order to sit there and have the District of Sechelt remove the unlawful Section 57 notice on title from my property, which after considerable effort, dialogue, and expense was achieved at the district's expense. So I want to be really clear before we proceed, and as I'm talking different issues and raising different issues, that the council understands why I'm raising these points. It's not just because I want to talk. It's not just because I want to take up time, but the points I'm going to be raising are really important and they're critical and they relate to the legislation.
And we want you to focus on the notice of title from 2016.
Yes, so it was a brief explanation as to why I want to cover the legislation. So the notice against title, land title, that building regulations contravene Section 57. So very specifically, a building inspector may recommend to the council that it consider a resolution under Section 3 if during the course of carrying out duties, the building inspector observes a condition with respect to the land or building or other structure that the inspector considers, 1, results from the contravention of or is in contravention of a municipal bylaw, provincial building regulation, or any other enactment that, and this is specific, that relates to the construction or safety of buildings or other structures. And again, reference on the and, point 2, that as a result of that condition, a building or other structure is unsafe or is unlikely to be usable for its expected purpose during its normal lifetime. So that's one option. The second option that the building inspector has or can do is discovers that under point B, something was done with respect to a building or other structure, or the construction of a building or other structure that required a permit or an inspection under a bylaw, regulation, or an enactment referred to in paragraph A1 and 2, the permit was not obtained or the inspection was not satisfactorily completed. The point that you've all received numerous emails from me in the last couple of weeks requesting a copy of the building inspector's written recommendation to the corporate officer. So that is covered in point 2 of section 57. A recommendation under subsection 1 must be given in writing to the corporate officer, who must A, give notice to the registered owner of the land to which the recommendation relates, and after notice under paragraph B, place the matter before council.
Okay, so Jerry, we can all read the act and we have our advice on it. So if you think there's something specific in here you want us to say, then pull us to that.
You'll be getting to it.
We only have so much time to be reasonably heard. So we want to hear why this notice of title should not be considered or should be reconsidered by council.
One of the important things for council and the public to know is that I previously communicated with former interim CAO Bill Beamish in July of 2015 and requested a meeting with him further to a discussion that we had that was witnessed in which he had made some statements that were not actually founded in fact. And I had requested at that time that he provide 2 to 3 days of time so that we could review the documents in detail, discuss the facts, and get on with life. At that time, Bill Beamish declined.
Yeah, that's not, Jerry, on the April 20, we're dealing with a report from April 6th, 2016.
Yes.
And that's what we need to deal with.
And Bill Beamish declined to meet. On February 10th, 2016, as I received a letter from John Hart of the District of Sechelt, Upon receiving that letter by email, as I responded to the District of Sechelt, informing the District of Sechelt, John Hart, the CAO, Mayor, and Council, that the contents of the letter were inaccurate. Also in that communication, I requested that a meeting with the current CAO, Tim Palmer, for approximately 3 days to review all of the documents, discuss the facts, and address these issues.
Yeah. And again,
Subsequently,
I'm asking you to focus on
we're getting there.
but you have to get there very quickly.
Well,
and the CAO would like to speak. Yeah. Oh, I forgot to tell you that some councillors have meetings, so Councillor Shanks is leaving because he has prior commitments. I think most other councillors are here for the duration, but.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just as a point of order and as Deputy Corporate Officer, I would request the Speaker speak to the matter and not other issues that are not directly related to the matter. Thanks.
I'm trying to get her to the same place, and so is she.
Yeah.
We're all trying to get there.
Well, I would sit there and say that if I wasn't interrupted by the mayor and whatever it is, it would be a lot
Speak to the
further
notice
along.
of title, and if you think there's reasons that we should reconsider it, and issues from 2014 are probably not relevant, or 2015.
Thank you, Mayor Milne. Please understand that you are frustrating my ability to put the material I would like to put in front of the council.
You have a right to be heard. Let's hear it.
Thank you. It appears that Mayor Milne would like to rush me along rather than allow me to be heard and put the facts in front of the council that are required. As
point of order on that, she does need to keep to the matter, and that's not helpful on the procedural. I recognize that this puts, and we do need to hear her. However, puts it at jeopardy, the hearing, if she will not get to the matter of the issue. Thank you.
It is my understanding that the District of Sechelt is once again frustrating or attempting to frustrate my ability to put the facts on record in front of council. I will be requesting that the council vote no to the request of the district's technical assistant, Jane Whittleton, and the co-author of the report placed in front of council to place a notice on title for the following reasons. The district has once again failed to comply fully with the community charter, specifically section 57. The District of Sechelt bylaw 409-2003 in section 1.52 clearly states the bylaw does not apply to part 1 of the BC Building Code, which relates to farms and farm buildings. Number 3, it is my informed understanding that the District of Sechelt building inspectors have no jurisdiction.
Thank you. We have a different understanding.
This is my opportunity to be heard. It doesn't say anything in section 57 about the mayor giving evidence. One of the issues that has arose again is that the district did not provide me an opportunity. It did not provide me a copy of the report to council prior to the report being published in the District of Sechelt website in the agenda for April 6th. So the report, the co-authored report by the technical assistant and Mr. Hart, was actually published on April 1st, and that was the first time that I had any access to the document. The provincial legislation that I have reviewed on this matter includes, but is not limited to, the Community Charter, the Local Government Act, the Building Act, the BC Code, and changes to the Code, the Agriculture Land Commission Act, the Lands Title Act, the Ombudsman's Act, the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act, the Assessment Act, the Disclosure Act, and the Supreme Court of BC Civil Rules. The District of Sechelt bylaws that have been reviewed and considered in this matter are the District of Sechelt bylaws relevant to this matter, which include but are not limited to the District of Sechelt Building Bylaw number 409-2003, the District of Sechelt Council.
So can you tell us how that's relevant, Jerry?
I will, if you just...
Tell us why that's relevant to this case.
I will in just a moment. District of Council Procedure Bylaw 521-2012, District of Sechelt Community Charter Plan Bylaw number 492, District of Sechelt Noise Bylaw 519-2012, District of Sechelt Zoning Bylaw number 25, District of Sechelt Dog Licensing and Control Bylaw number 221-1994, District of Sechelt Business License number 180-119 for 1992 and amendments, and District of Sechelt License Bylaw number 520-2012. District of Sechelt Bylaw Notice Enforcement Implementation number 515-2012, and the District of Sechelt Highways and Parking Bylaw 518-2012 and amendments 516-1 2015.
Okay, you have to start speaking to the issue, Jerry, and if you go through a list like that again, I'll simply rule you out of order. That's not relevant to the point, what you review and didn't review. Speak to the issue that's in front of us.
It is relevant in this, is that it's the bylaws and the legislation that the members of council should understand relate to this matter and are under consideration by them before making a decision. So I'm going to refer you to page 1 of my exhibits, please. So the report titled Request for Decision is dated March 18th, 2016, and is co-authored by John Hart, a building official, and Jane Whittleton, a technical assistant. This report alone fails to comply with the requirements of Section 57 of the Community Charter, which requires a report from the building inspector only. Despite that, I will respond to the report. The report is not factual or inclusive in content, which the Mayor and Council have been informed of in writing by email, as was Mr. Hart and the CAO. The report includes an attachment as a letter dated February 10th, 2016, attributed to the District of Sechelt John Hart that is not factual or inclusive of content. I informed the Mayor, Council, John Hart, and the CAO of that fact in writing on February 10th, 2016. The report includes an attachment letter dated March 17, 2016, attributed to the Sechelt's interim corporate officer, Jerry Vanderwolf, that is not factual and inclusive in content. The Mayor, Council, and CAO, Palmer, were informed of that fact upon receipt of that document.
So for our purposes, if there's a specific inaccuracy that may be useful to know, that would be useful. Otherwise, the real question is there in fact a completed building inspection or not? It's really simple.
In response to the report, co-authored by the district's technical assistant, Jane Whittleton, and John Hart, at the beginning of their report, they wrote the purpose: to obtain council authorization to register a notice of bylaw contravention in the Land Title Office due to a contravention of the district's building inspection bylaw in accordance with Section 57 of the Community Charter. My questions in response, which have not been answered, is, and I have requested repeatedly that the building inspector's written recommendations to the corporate officer be produced, hoping that perhaps that document, if it exists, would answer the question. In response to the allegation of a contravention, what is the contravention? My second point is that in the purpose that the co-authors of this document refer to the building inspection bylaw. What is the building inspection bylaw? Do the authors really mean the District of Sechelt building bylaw number 409/2003, or is there some other document that has not been produced and that I'm not aware of? What subsection of the Community Charter, Section 57, are the technical assistant and Mr. Hart referencing? Are they referring to one, or where they're saying that there's unsafe building, contravention of construction? This resulted in an unsafe building that can't be used, won't last? Or are they saying two, that there's a contravention of the District of Sechelt building bylaw 409/2003? What are they saying? How do I respond to something that they haven't said or identified? Next, under options and alternatives, the technical assistant, Mr. Hart, wrote, staff recommends that council authorize the interim corporate officer to place a notice on title of the subject property as it is in contravention of the district building regulations relating to safe construction of the building. So my question to this is, what are the technical assistant, Mr. Hart, referencing when they wrote, as it is in contravention of district building regulations related to safe construction of a building? What are they referring to? My next question is, the district or interim corporate officer, the since John Hart, failed to identify a contravention. What is the contravention that relates to safe contravention of a building?
Okay, Ms. Patterson, we're here to listen to you in terms of the concern about the completion of building permits or non-completion. If you think that there are technical and legal issues with our process, that's not for council to judge. There's another process for you to deal with that'll actually look at those issues. Council, in fact, is not a legal tribunal. We're here to consider the report that was in front of us, consider its general applications and its approach, and consider whether or not the facts of the building inspection process and the completion of a building permit are in order. If you have legal concerns with the technical way of this process, you have other pathways for that. This is not that pathway.
All right, may I continue?
You may continue for probably 4 or 5 minutes longer, but you have to get to the point of whether or not there's a completed building inspection, and because that's what the notice is about. That's what you have to deal with. If you don't like the process, you have another avenue, and it's not this avenue. You need to know that.
The important thing about the Community Charter Section 57 is it's the legislation that governs and gives guidance to a municipality, including the members of council and the mayor and staff, of course. One always hopes for full compliance with it. And one of the things that must be considered, as I've already experienced, is that when district staff violate the legislation, it ends up with me carrying the burden of an unlawful notice on title and the district bearing the burden of fixing that. So I'm hoping we don't go down that road again. So the next point in the report authored by the technical assistant and Mr. Hart is under discussion. So under context and background, it says a building permit was issued on 2009 for the construction of an animal kennel at 6708 Norwest Bay Road. In the report to council is that the authors failed to report that the building permit for the kennel auxiliary building was issued in April of 2009. And under that, the district staff decided to call the building a kennel on the building permit. In fact, it is and always was designed as an auxiliary building. BC assessment calls it an above standard garage on their assessments. At the time I returned to Sechelt in 2009, I owned 7 dogs. I've never boarded or bred dogs. The district bylaws, number 221, and zoning bylaw number 25 required that I apply for a kennel license. There is a contradiction in these 2 bylaws, one saying more than 3 dogs, the other saying more than 4 dogs, and at some point, hopefully the district will remedy the inconsistencies in those 2 bylaws.
Again, Jerry, our bylaws aren't under consideration. It's about a building inspection report. That's what it's about.
So the district has not complied with or refunded my money that I paid for a business license under bylaw number 520-2012.
And we're not considering that tonight.
And one of the things that is also incredibly important, as I've mentioned previously, is that the co-authors of the report to council had failed to remember that I was not the owner of the subject property in April 2009. John Hart, one of the authors of the report to council, was well aware of that fact, and that is well documented in the District of Sechelt documents. The initial relationship with the trades owners and myself as an agent with the building inspectors was good, specifically John Hart. He was the primary inspector, and our initial relationship and everything moved along well between trades and Mr. Hart. So what happened then is that, and if you look under the exhibits at page 26, 27, and 28, you will see that there are a number of building inspection reports that were completed. As was standard procedure in the District of Sechelt, is that as the building proceeded, is trades, the owner, or myself would call for an inspection, and usually within the same day or in a couple days is that we would have a response. The building inspector would respond and fill out a field inspection notice, as you see under exhibits page 26, 27, 28. So again, in the report to council is that the technical assistant, Mr. Hart, failed to include in the report the fact that numerous professional reports were done and produced and provided to the District of Sechelt as required. And these documents have been produced by the District of Sechelt back to me in an FOI response, so I'm well aware that they did receive the documents and do have the documents. In June 2009, issues developed between the two Johns, as we referred to them, that were both building inspectors with the District of Sechelt, as it related to the code or the interpretation of the code on a vent pipe. One of the inspectors wanted a 2-inch, the other a 3-inch, and this is again documented in the field inspection notices I'd referenced to you. This internal issue at the district between the two building inspectors is further documented in district documents obtained through the FOI process. The trades on site were caught between the Johns, and the issue escalated on June 23, 2009. And if you refer to Exhibit 26 and the document on the left,
Jerry, I want to remind you, this is not a court of law, and exhibits.
This is relevant.
Well, you've got 7 years to catch up from 2009 to 2016, and you probably have, I would say, 5 minutes. I'm serious. You speak to the issue for 2016.
I understand that Mayor Milne is attempting to frustrate my ability to present the facts, and I would like to proceed.
I'm attempting
The
to have a
District of Sechelt former building inspector,
hearing.
John Mercer, on June 23, 2009, wrote on an initial field inspection notice, permit for accessory buildings must be issued prior to further inspections on this permit. This is under page 26 of the exhibits. There is no provisions under District Building Bylaw 409-2003 for a building inspector to refuse to respond or conduct inspections. There is no provision in the BC Building Code for a building inspector to refuse to conduct inspections. Myself, trades, the owner, all called as required and outlined for the procedure and as had been established for inspections. However, is that the District of Sechelt building inspectors failed to respond repeatedly. So when the District of Sechelt staff, including the technical assistant, Mr. Hart, write that the last inspection was conducted in 2009, what they really mean is that the last field inspection notice was conducted in 2009. What they failed to report is that myself, trades, the owner, we all called for inspections. It's just that the District of Sechelt building inspectors did not respond.
And if I can read that exhibit correctly, the reason they didn't respond is because a permit needed to be issued.
Mayor Milne, if you would allow me to continue to put my evidence, would you allow me to continue to put my evidence? Thank you. So the assistant and Mr. Hart in their co-authored report to council also failed to include in the report to council the times that district staff, including the building inspectors, entered onto and into the subject property after June 23, 2009 without notice. Their conduct on more than one occasion could be considered in violation of Section 16 of the Community Charter. One example of this conduct, which is documented in an incomplete and unsigned field notice, inspection notice, which was produced by the district in their FOI response, occurred on July 24, 2009. At approximately 11 a.m. on July 24, 2009, a person who failed to have identification, as required under District of Sechelt Bylaw number 409-2003, section 3.2, which states a building official shall carry proper identifications and credentials. So when I questioned the person as to who they were, the person identified himself as Rick Wildeman, a building inspector for the District of Sechelt. At that time, I had never met Rick Wildeman, and the unkempt appearance of this person triggered my request for identification, which Mr. Wildeman was unable to produce. There was no vehicle in view, and this person appeared to have arrived on foot. Subsequently, is John Hart, who I knew to be a District of Sechelt building inspector, also arrived by foot. Rick Wildeman and John Hart spent approximately 30 minutes on the property, wandering in and out of buildings, taking photographs, and behaving in a generally unprofessional manner. I filed a complaint as a response with the RCMP regarding the conduct of John Hart and Rick Wildeman.
Yeah, we don't need to editorialize on staff, Jerry. And Ms. Patterson has approximately 2 minutes before I'll ask council if they've heard enough for us to move forward.
District of staff entered onto and into the property without notice several times, as was witnessed by myself, trades others, and in some cases documented in additional RCMP files. The conduct of district staff on occasion violated 16 of the community charter. Also in the report, the co-authors failed to include the report to council the times the district provided notice as required under section 16 of the community charter to enter onto and into the property. For example, the reports failed to advise council that on July 17th, 2011, the district's former employee Bruce Haynes served me with notice that he would enter onto, as his letter says, enter on your property, including entering outbuildings on this property on Monday, June 20th, 2011. This document is included at exhibit page 31. Mr. Haynes wrote, "The purpose of my entering on your property is to inspect." The co-authors also failed to include in the report to council that on August 15th, 2011, I was served with the documents located at exhibit page 33, and the document was delivered by hand, which states RE building permit number 4872. This is to inform you that on August 18th, 2011, at 11 a.m., District of Sechelt officials along with an RCMP member will enter onto your property to inspect buildings and determine whether all regulations and requirements are being met regarding the above noted building permit and the District of Sechelt and building bylaw number 409/2003. The letter is signed by Rick Wildeman, Chief Building Official.
Okay, Jerry, it's now 30 plus minutes of us seeing if you'd like to speak to the fact that there is an incomplete building permit and a notice of title that may be placed. I'm going to ask council if they require any additional hearing from you. I certainly don't think I do.
I will request council to provide me with the opportunity to be heard as per the legislation.
We have.
And for me to provide the facts which are coming, which are relevant to any decision.
We have.
And
if
which
you
the
have
District of
facts
Sechelt
that you want to bring forward, you should bring them forward.
I am attempting to bring them forward, Mayor Milne.
We've given you a chance to be heard.
If you've refrained from interrupting all the time, we would be almost done.
Excuse me. We have given you a chance to be heard. If you think that we have not, or there are technical issues in our process that you have not, that we haven't followed and you think we should have followed, going back to 2009, or as you are now almost in 2011, there are other avenues appropriate for that discussion. This council meeting is not an appropriate discussion of those facts. Today, we're to consider a notice on title based on the completion or incompletion of building inspection reports. So far, you've failed to speak to that. So I have no reason to think council needs to require any further discussion. I'm interrupting now just to look at council and ask for their guidance on whether they've heard enough in the last 30 minutes or whether they feel they'd like to give you some additional time, probably 5-10 minutes maximum, before we call the meeting to order. So I'd look to council and if they would like to give me any advice on that. And if not, I'll just proceed on my own understanding. I just want you to have a chance to participate. Councillor Seegers.
I'd like to hear what she has to say with regards to the building permit, the notice on, and whether or not it's valid, inspections, where are we with regards to that? All the rest of it is not applicable this time.
There's been 35 minutes for that. Yeah. Councillor Wright.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I would like to hear what Ms. Patterson has to say with reference to the report, and then I have a couple questions regarding the report. So,
And your questions would be to Mr. Hart?
yes. Okay. And as long as I think we have to keep to the report that's here, but I would like to hear what they have to say.
Okay. Anything else? Councillor Mueller?
My personal feeling is that we should table this so that we can go through the 75 pages of whatever is there and come to our own discussions. For me personally, I don't have any more time for this. I'll be leaving regardless, so.
I won't take that as a motion to table right yet, because I'd like to see if there's any other thoughts, because that can't be debated. Councillor Lutz?
I too would like to hear information to the report, not the last 9 years of information.
Okay. And Councillor Inkster?
I guess now that all the council's spoken, you know, till the hour, if we can stick to the relevant pieces that we need to hear as a council to meet our test of decision. And then unfortunately, soon after that, I have to go deal with some children's issues. And I had thought, based on our agenda, that we would have probably been done by 5:15 with the information that was needed by us. So that's, I know Councillor Mueller may be leaving before me, but I'll be having to leave soon after.
Okay. As chair, I'm hearing councillors basically say they would like to give another chance, an opportunity for a few minutes of discussion to the issue of 2016, and then they would like some opportunity when you're finished or when we say there's enough to have some discussion among ourselves or questions. One councillor would like to perhaps not make a decision until we can actually reference all this, and we'll come back to that. I'd prefer not to table it right now, because then it would be over. So I'd prefer not to table it, but I understand we may not want to make a decision until people have referenced this. Councillor Mueller.
And the whole thrust of that was more than anything that when we're presented with so-called evidence like this, that we can read it and come to our own conclusions. It doesn't have to be editorialized.
Yes, and I think it's consistent with your approach on the 457-page agenda and your approach on some of the other things we're given at the last minute. I totally agree. I think we're prepared, Ms. Pattison, to have you continue for a short while, another 5 or 6 minutes, and try and make your points as direct as possible to the issue in front of us and not to the past or the history. We have a fairly cut and dried issue in front of us in terms of the notice of title. Thank you.
I'm responding to a report that dates June 2009. Reports that state April 2009. How do I respond to something in the report that's dated 2009 if I'm not permitted to speak to 2009? I'm extremely concerned. I have given written and verbal notice to the mayor himself that I required significant time to present the facts. I requested to the CAOs that we do this over time in their office where we could get to the facts and not be concerned about hurting anybody's feelings. Those were declined. The choice to sit there and choose this process has been the District of Sechelt, not mine. And now I sense that I'm being frustrated in my ability to speak to an entire council. We're down to 4 council members and a mayor. So I spent 3.5 hours waiting on April 6th to be heard, and I spent a considerable time, over 2.5 hours, waiting today to have an opportunity to be heard. And you're being telling me I can't be heard?
We're telling you to speak to the issue.
The District of Sechelt has not produced any building inspection notices since June 23rd, 24th, 2009. What is important to note about that is it's not that the inspections weren't called for. It's not that inspections weren't done. But what has happened is the District of Sechelt building inspectors failed to complete field inspection notices. I've reviewed the bylaw, Building Bylaw 409-2003 in detail, and there is no requirement that I could identify in that bylaw that says that a building inspector must complete a field inspection notice. So we're well aware that number of, when I requested or the trades requested inspections, they didn't occur after John Mercer decided there weren't going to be any. But however, despite that, is we had repeated entry onto the lands and into the buildings by district staff, including the building inspectors, including when they gave written notice to conduct inspections, but there's no field inspection notices. Now, one of the things that is really important, because one of the allegations that is being made or alluded to in an unidentified and unspecified way is that there's safety issues with the construction that have resulted in a safety and health risk. What are they? So wouldn't one think that in all of these inspections that district staff did, that if there was a huge safety issue with construction, that they would not have issued a field inspection notice? That they wouldn't have written a letter to myself, the trades, the owners of the property at that time saying, we've identified a very serious issue with the construction that is resulting in a safety and health concern. Has that ever occurred? No. So when you're talking about, is Mayor Milne's intent of going, well, how come there's outstanding building permits? How come there's not a final inspection report? Well, I guess we can look at the building department. They failed to complete their field inspection notices. So after repeatedly the previous owner, having the building permit, paying all the fees. After I obtained the property in December of 2009, I continued to renew permits, have discussions, wait for some kind of professional conduct, reasonable conduct from the District of Sechelt's building department to get those documents. Did it occur? No. So after 4 years of attempting to deal with the District of Sechelt Building Inspection Department, who randomly decided, unreasonably decided, unprofessionally decided that they were no longer completing field inspection notices, we gave up renewing permits. Along in the time frame of that, which is also in documents, which you will find in your files, and unfortunately the co-authors of this report are well aware of, or should be aware of, but have not mentioned to the council in their report, is that if you look at, I'm gonna have to sit there and figure out which pages they're on, trying to rush through this now out of order. If you would look, you will sit there and see that the property is located with, if you go to exhibit page 25 and exhibit page 30, these are two letters that are written to me by the District of Sechelt's planning, Angela Letman. And the property is located within the Agricultural Land Reserve, is zoned RR2, Rural Zone 2. The use of the land is designated as agriculture in the West Sechelt Neighborhood Plan of the District of Sechelt Official Community Plan. This information is documented in Angela's letters. So the District of Sechelt assistant and Mr. Hart failed to inform the council of this. And you're thinking, well, what's the relevance? Well, the relevance of this is that the BC assessment under the provincial government has assigned farm status to the property. It is a working farm. Mayor Milne, Councillor Wright, Councillor Inkster, you've been up there, you're well aware it's a working farm. So BC assessment has designated my land and my use of the land as a farm activity. The District of Sechelt has never appealed or challenged those assessments by BC assessment, and it has farm status. So what the report that was presented to council fails to sit there and mention is that the District of Sechelt Building Bylaw number 409/2003, section 1.52 states, this bylaw does not apply to Point 1, buildings or structures exempt by Part 1 of the Building Code except as expressly provided herein. And as Mayor Milne is intent on rushing me along, I will just summarize by saying Part 1 of the BC Building Code relates to farms and the buildings on farms. So by the time that we had frustrated 4 years of building permits and had suffered at the hands of the District of Sechelt building inspectors failing to proceed as is normal or reasonable in doing inspections, responding to recalls, completing reports, is that in discussions, is that it was brought to my attention by high-level advisors that in fact is that the District of Sechelt Building Bylaw 2003 specifically says that it does not apply to Part 1 buildings, which includes my structures.
Thank you. At this point, we have not only councillors leaving, but a couple of community members, so we'll just allow Councillor Inkster. We still have a quorum. The meeting is still in order, and but we have gone past the time we thought we'd give as an extension. I have to say that the last 3.5 minutes were probably the most focused, and we specifically had 2 reasons why we should consider it. If those 2 reasons or any other reasons had been focused over the last 45 minutes, we might be closer to where we want to go. So the building inspections don't apply to because it's a working farm. That's one. Quit applying for permits because it was frustrated in the 4-year period of applying. That's a second understanding of why it is.
And under bylaw 409, 2003, the district has no jurisdiction because it specifically says it's exempt. Part 1 of the BC Building Code is exempt. So
now these are all your interpretations, but that's what we need to hear as briefly and quickly as we could so we could then consider it. So I have heard councillors say that they would like to look at some of the material, and I know there's some questions from councillors through on the report itself that was done, but I think we've heard from...
Could I have 2 more minutes just to address? One of the, again, is that in the report that was co-authored and sent to council, it says that no building permit application has been submitted for this shed. A good thing I can speak. And it also, in John Hart's letter dated February 10th, 2010, he very specifically states, if you refer to his letter, you guys are missing out on all the good stuff.
We'll get to it.
Well, you won't because you don't have this.
Okay.
And
well, we'll read what's here.
Well, that will mean very little to you, actually. Is that so, again, as I'm... Oh, are you okay? I thought you were joking at me. Is that I'm very frustrated that I'm not being permitted the opportunity to present the facts. So...
You wanted to clarify one more point.
Yes, I'm just trying to rush to the bottom.
Yeah, give you a chance.
John Hart in his letter wrote that requesting an inspection regarding the accessory building, apply for building permit and provide a site plan. He wrote that on February 10th, 2016. The FOI response I received from the district included copies of the site plans, which are included in my exhibits. And if you see, they were dated May 2009. Those documents were received in an FOI response from the district of Sechelt. So Mr. Hart in his February 10th, 2009 letter to council, which he's provided as part of his report, is saying, and provide a site plan. Well, those site plans were provided years ago. Years ago. So one of the big points that I'm trying to address with Mayor Milne and with members of the council is that, you're saying, get to the facts, get to the facts. Well, one of the big and the most important facts that need to be presented is that the documents that have been put in front of you by Jane Whittleton, John Hart, and Jerry Vanderwolf are so incredibly flawed and inaccurate that they're making statements that going, oh, you haven't given the site plans. Well, the District of Sechelt's own FOI responses document they had received them in May of 2009. So he's demanding that I produce them now because I've never produced them? Well, that's a false statement. So he's implying, oh, she hasn't had any building inspections since June 2009. Implying I'm this bad person. Well, in fact, we called for them. They didn't respond. They did building inspections. They didn't deal with field inspection notices. They're accusing saying that I didn't do site plans when, in fact, the District of Sechelt documents and FOI responses clearly show that they have received them. They're saying that there were no applications done. So the allegations that are included in these documents are unfounded, inaccurate, and very, very wrong.
And thus they shouldn't be relied on by council in their motion. And
so
we take that
one
point.
of the reasons why I requested repeatedly that I have 2 hours to attend this meeting and present the facts is that I think it's time that you as a mayor, Mayor Milne, and council and staff are aware of the facts. I am exhausted by these unfounded and unsubstantiated allegations. The trades involved are looking at these reports and going, oh, great, so we've got allegations of an unidentified, unsubstantiated construction contravention that has resulted in a safety and health issue. What is it?
Okay. I'm not going to respond to what it might be or what language might mean that's different than yours. There are other interpretations, and certainly none of the implications are that you are a bad person or that in somehow being in contravention of a bylaw in the eyes of the inspector reflects on anything except incomplete reports and records. I think council has enough to consider, and we'd like to do that now. We'd like to thank you for the presentation, truncated as it was, and I'll recognize that you wanted to present more.
Sadly, you're missing out on some really, really critical and important information.
If you feel that our process isn't adequate, then, as I've said earlier, there's avenues that are not the council. The council is simply to look at a report, hear from the individual property owners whether there's issues that we should consider. We've heard those, and now I turn it back to council.
Respectfully, Mayor Milne, I'd also just very quickly like to sit there and say, under the legislation, Section 57 and Section 58, is that the next steps are very clearly outlined. Is that if you make the decision that I hope that you won't make and that you shouldn't make, is that the next step would be coming in front of council on Wednesday and asking for you to reverse that decision. And failing that, then the next step will be the Supreme Court of Canada.
Yeah, we understand.
Sorry, Supreme Court of BC.
We understand that. Thank you. To council, we have a motion in front of us. We have had 3 councillors leave. One who, before he left, expressly indicated he'd like more time before he came back to this. I think we should take that into consideration. Are there questions and clarifications from either Jerry while she's with us today or John, who authored the report? Mr. Wright, Councillor Wright.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple questions for Mr. Hart, I guess. I get concerned when I see dates and they're years apart and nothing seems to have happened in those time frames. We've had a couple other reports today where I questioned that. I guess were there inspections called for that did not happen?
As far as getting us, seeing the inspection cards and saying, well, okay, we're not going there?
No?
That never happened.
Okay.
So what? Mr. Wright may know what the answer to that is, or what the question he asked was. Was that the question you asked?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
It would appear that when there are outstanding issues that we can close the file and we can call it incomplete.
The only outstanding issue at the time.
Yeah, perhaps if Jerry could sit back and John could go to the mic. Thanks. Well, but that's where he should be sitting. Yeah. John, Jerry will sit back and you can come forward. This is all, again, recorded on YouTube and we want it recorded. Thank you.
At the last date.
Sorry, that's my fault.
At the last date of the inspection, she was asked to come in and apply for a building permit for the accessory building. Mm-hmm. That was constructed without a permit. And after that date, no more inspections were called for.
Okay. So we can close a file or we can put a notice on title. Is that correct? Or those are 2 options? In the report, it says where there are outstanding on page That's 14. It says where outstanding items do not constitute a safety or health hazard, the file is closed as incomplete or expired. Then the next statement says safety and health issues could exist, which would be a contravention of the district's building inspection bylaw. So that to me means.
I think in the letter it says may exist.
Okay.
And that what you're reading says could.
That's
and again,
right.
when it's incomplete, there's a reasonable doubt, and therefore, by definition, if it's not complete, there's a doubt.
And are there health and safety violations with the building in question?
May.
He wouldn't know.
Wouldn't know, we never did any inspections.
That's the
We
whole
weren't
point.
called.
The whole point, if there's no inspection, we don't know what's there. It's not uncommon on the Sunshine Coast to have buildings erected without inspections or without permits. I happen to own a property in another jurisdiction that is completely unpermitted. I bought it that way. The jurisdiction in question can come and then ask for that to be rectified, and there's a process for that.
Okay.
And they don't know in advance what's there because they've never seen it. So further questions from Councillor Wright? Not for now yet. And Councillor Seegers, we can come back.
Thank you. So what is the process when a permit expires, it's not renewed, and yet the owner potentially requests inspections? Do we require that the building permit be renewed, and then we will go out and do inspections? We will not go out and do inspections even if they're called for, unless there's a valid building permit in place. Is that correct?
That's how it works, yes.
Okay.
You need a building permit to get inspections.
Thank you.
And that could either be expired, as you mentioned, or it could be on a building in which there wasn't one issued in either case, but they shouldn't officially do inspections in those cases. And then the question becomes, our greater issue to the broader community about buildings that don't have occupancy permits or final completions, and how we respond to that. The notice of title is actually a fairly innocuous item, and it's more of a flag to potential people, and it can be taken off and discharged for a nominal fee, I think $100. But it's on there so that potential people in the future, and I think this council has learned more than any others, that our commitment must be to the future and not to the present day on all sorts of issues, whether it's development permits or developers or what. So, Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I'm sorry to belabor this, but I want to be very clear on it. So if it was me that was in this situation, would I be faced with the same? Would you be putting a notice on my title? I guess what I'm asking is, are we being fair and equitable with the citizens of Sechelt? I want to make sure that you would treat every other citizen that under these circumstances, you would treat them exactly this way.
This is the course that we take. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess, Your Worship, if you'll indulge me, to our CAO, what we're doing is legitimate and legal. Is that correct?
Your Worship, yes. To the best of my knowledge of the information that's been provided to me and what's contained in this report, and if we focus on the issue of the report, not all the processing items, but the matter is that there's a building on the property that's had in the past a building, an application for a building permit, and it expired after renewals. I know I'm repeating. And what would be required to bring that into compliance is to apply for a new building permit, and then that would trigger the inspections. And that is the desirable outcome. Additionally, there's been observed by the building inspector that there is a second building that's been constructed on the property. And again, what would the desirable outcome would be to apply for a building permit and have appropriate inspections. and then that would satisfy the district's needs. I would just like to quickly, just for clarification, I picked up on a few things from Ms. Patterson's that I think are some not necessarily relevant, but I think the main points.
If they're not relevant, we don't want to discuss them, and we don't want to get into a legal debate.
Yeah.
So as long as you stay away from that.
Yeah, so they're just the points that I think the main things was that there was numerous professional reports, but again, they didn't specify how it applies to these buildings. I think the mayor already identified that there is a question that I don't immediately have an answer, and it may be an answer that our question to the building inspector on the farm status and agricultural zoning. I don't specifically know that, so that's one new piece of information that he may or may not have information on.
And Councillor Seegers, and then I'd like to comment on Councillor Wright's question about equity.
Yeah, that was my question as well, the last point that the CAO brought up. Ms. Patterson indicated that as the land has farm status, she believes that our building bylaws and the BC Building Code do not apply as such, and we cannot require that she need to have a valid permit in order to move this forward. I think that's kind of how it's
Actually, I would like to clarify that, Councillor Seegers, is that the District of Sechelt Building Bylaw Form 2003 in section 1.52 says that it has an area of exemptions, and the exemptions are part 1 of the BC Building Code. So so both of them apply. The bylaw 409 as it's written, specifically states that anything under part 1 of the BC Building Code is exempt from the process that is followed, like say tradition with a house or a residential building. So then under part 1 of the BC Building Code, and I've had extensive conversations and communications with the BC advisors of Bob Thompson, retired. And so it's, I think, sentence 1.1.1.1, that something along that line, that defines what farm buildings. So the bottom line is that these buildings, and I should be really clear about this, is that we're not talking about residential buildings. We're talking about auxiliary outdoor.
There was a specific question. We'll look into that.
Yes,
to
that's
verify
that's
what
something
the
that
answer
we
is.
need to look into.
I'm sorry, Jerry.
That both your bylaw and the code do apply, but they both say that they're exempt, and the BC Building Code refers to the National Farm Building Code.
We'll look for our own interpretation on these issues.
Please.
I've
I'd like that
already
looked
run into
into. Yes,
examples
thank
here where citizens bring forward interpretations of a number of acts that are, to say the least, misreadings. And when I made my comments 2 weeks ago about not practicing law without a license, I very much want us not to do that ourselves. So we'll look into that, and we'll read the entire act and the entire bylaw, both sides, see what the text is. Are there any other questions on the report? What I'm actually hearing is that there are some issues we'd still like some clarification on. There is some councillor, at least, who would like more time to process this. So we actually would prefer not to deal with this motion tonight, but not refer it back to staff. I'd like to keep it on our table so that it comes forward. So I'd look for a motion echoing Councillor Mueller's that we table this until the next council meeting. I can do that. Okay. So moved by Councillor Seegers, seconded by Councillor Lutz. And just to complete the circle on this, I heard your question. I understand that that is a very important value for this community. I would say that if anything, my understanding of this particular example is that staff may have erred in an abundance of caution in this particular case that would not be afforded to all citizens. And one example of that I'll give is that it was brought to my attention in my office with concerns and a question about how and when it should proceed, and my response was exactly the same as you would for every other citizen. But there was enough caution that they wanted to check that. So if anything, it's been an abundance of caution rather than a just slapdash, here's the process. So we've, as I think we did today in listening and attempting to give Ms. Pattison a chance to be heard legally, I think we've been bending over with caution and fairness to ensure that there's no inappropriate activity or actions on part of staff or council. Councillor Seegers.
Yes, as a follow-up to that point about the farm status, etc., I know in our recorded information from this, Ms. Pattison has referred to those. I'd like staff to pull that information and get that to us so we know the applicable
Yes. No, we'll
documents
have to
to
have
read.
that when it comes back to council. That's one thing that'll have to be
Actually,
clarified.
probably prior, because it sounds like we'll be doing a lot of reading.
Well, if you're going to read it yourself, I don't think any of us will read it, but we should get a legal response on that particular issue. I don't want us to be interpreting the law either. So, okay, is council satisfied? We'll have a motion to table. Won't be recognized at the moment. All those in favor? It's carried. That concludes this issue for tonight, and it will come back to council to consider the motion in front of us. I think then we'll gather all of the information that we have, hear from staff or CAO or corporate officer if there's any last issues, and then make our decision. Jerry? And do you need the microphone? And it helps because it's recorded, because these are video live streamed, I should say, and they end up as well watched in many, many places. I'm scared to even think.
Yeah, you have no idea. Anyway, is Mayor Milne, Council, and CEO Palmer is that I would respectfully request that my ability to put the facts and point out the errors of the reports has been somewhat frustrated by time and by this venue. Is that I'm requesting whether perhaps I could complete a written submission, which I didn't have an opportunity to provide previously because I didn't get notice and an opportunity to do so, is whether I could complete my submission to you in a written format, so that when you're looking at the exhibits, there's some context to them, because without me explaining the context, you might look at them and go, so what?
Given that we've extended this discussion for another week or 2 weeks, when's the next council meeting? The 20th? That's not very long. We may want to give it 3 weeks. I don't think it's unreasonable to allow you to provide a written response.
Thank you.
We do have to conclude it at some point, but it's not unreasonable to allow you to provide that as a written response. I think we've heard quite a bit and we'll consider it, but if there's more that you'd like to present, we'll accept it.
I think for full consideration and understanding of the issues, because there were some questions that were asked which were put in front of Mr. Hart, which I didn't have an opportunity to respond to, which I could have provided more clarification and referred you to the relevant documents.
Yeah, and we didn't want disagreement because we know there would just be disagreement.
Yeah, so. And so I think there's matters along that line. But I really want to reinforce this, is that I have repeatedly requested for meetings to sit there and go through all of this paperwork in a private situation so we could get the facts on the table, not be concerned about the public, et cetera, and get the facts of these issues sorted out and resolved. Is that one of the questions that was brought up was about inspections without building permits, is all the times that we requested for the inspections, myself, trades owners, were times when we did have building permits. Yeah. And we had no responses. So those are items like I would like to do. So I will do a finish my submission into you in writing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you. And I'd like to look for a motion to adjourn unless it's to council. Okay.
Yeah, could I request that we have staff indicate to Ms. Patterson by when we should have the information so that we have sufficient time to review that prior to the meeting?
Yes,
that's
why
it's a
I'm
week
thinking next
before
week.
or whatever.
I think we tabled this. I think not the next council meeting. I think it should be 3 weeks.
Right, but then prior to that, when should we give her a date by when we should have the information?
Okay.
Thank you.
Further discussion on this particular item? Motion to adjourn. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz. All those in favor of adjourning can speak to us at any time. Well, meeting has been adjourned. questions from the community members or the media that are here? We'll start on my